Nick Daez Podcast.
Right, thanks for being here. You went to Mongolia recently. How did it come about? How was it? Tell us your story.
Yeah, so thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. So Mongolia, that was my last trip. It was a 6 days in and out, mostly off-roading, big bikes, motorcycle trip through Mongolia. So this one, it really, I guess like all the best things, it really wasn't in the plan. This year, I was really not gonna go because I just had so many big expenses, was going to be an expensive trip with a premium provider. But in the end, what convinced me was a really great group of people, both people who are my friends and people who are in both my friends and influential in the adventure motorcycling world in the Philippines, which is a pretty small world. So in the end, I couldn't say no. I wanted to spend time with these people, get to know these people, just quality people all around. And it pretty much turned out that way, riding with them. You know how it is, you're doing a slightly dangerous activity together and you're enjoying the sights. It was really something. The sights in Mongolia, I think, are just so unique. Just unlimited land in every direction. It was really good for the soul.
That's great, man. While you were in Mongolia, I guess what are the things that you noticed riding your motorcycle there, and even like with your interactions with the locals and the food? What are the things that kind of stayed with you?
Great question. One thing I noticed, especially in the first night where the staff themselves played some instruments and sang some songs for us, which were incredibly soulful. It's such a fascinating country. And I think there's, from my perspective, there's two things that are defining of their culture. First is just the land. Just the Central Asian steppe is just one big, huge expanse of wilderness, and I guess a mix of deserts and a few other kind of types of terrain. And so they feel very, very deeply connected to the physical nature of their geography in a way that I haven't seen in a lot of places I've gone to. And in terms, I guess most of the country is just really vast, kind of vast wilderness, very barren. And there's still like a significant number of the population that live as nomads. So that's very unique. And so they had sang a song for us that night, which was all about missing their land. And so that's something I found really interesting, like a people so identifying so deeply with like the physical land where they're from.
It's amazing, man. I can imagine how the effect of nature really influence the way you see things. I've been seeing your travels around the Philippines, and you were also in Thailand recently. And we had a brief conversation 2 days ago. I want to dedicate more of your time into content creation. And I want to dive into this because I feel like it's a very interesting space as compared to our day jobs, wherein we work in advertising and video production. There's a very stark contrast between the two in terms of like client servicing. On the other hand, there's you creating content, but also working with clients. Curious to hear about your journey getting into the YouTube, Instagram, but at the same time, like getting into the video production industry as a director, as a filmmaker. What are your thoughts on that right now?
You and I, we come from sort of a generation that would have been in between, in the sense that none of us would have grown up in video as independent content creators. We're still old enough that to have gotten into video, we would have had to be kind of in production or shooting events and weddings. But even then, because wedding SDEs were becoming a thing just as we had graduated from college. So people our age, you would be too old to have been content native. And so the implication of that is that we maybe, from my perspective, there's a little bit of a bigger divide in our minds between being a production person on one hand and being a content creator. And I began doing content, I guess, in like 2014. So already 10 years ago. But there was always an apprehension, if you will, because I guess I would speak for both of us. We would want to be seen more as like quote unquote legit production people rather than as like amateur content creators. Right. And so there was always that sort of divide, apprehension, or even condescension. People who would be self-taught, which is very different now, because now you can come up just completely bypassing traditional apprenticeships, traditional training, learn everything from YouTube and from online courses. So it's a bit strange to now be, I guess, making a shift more to content from production. But I guess in a nutshell, it's quite parallel to when we first met in 2014, when we had all these conversations directing TV commercials for a couple of years, which was back then, maybe even now, considered to be kind of the most legit, kind of like the most pro league locally in video production, right? I mean, even more than making movies. You know, you work with the best equipment, the most skilled people, and I had been able to arrive there relatively early at age 26. But then, you know, I had my quote unquote quarter life crisis. And then I kind of quote unquote quit from that. And then coming back from traveling for a few months, I started on what is my path now, I guess, which is kind of a specialist run and gun travel docu corporate shooter, doing lower stress but more interesting projects. And I remember my line of reasoning back then was there could be so many reasons, but I think the primary reason in my mind of why I was confident in leaving TV commercials behind is that because I know I have talent to contribute, and I feel like it wasn't being used. As a commercial director, I felt more like a manager or a coordinator than as a creative person or artist. And this is not a knock on. I have many friends who are great commercial directors, and I see that's where their talent lies. I see they're great at running this kind of operation, especially managing agency, managing client, keeping everybody happy. You have to be kind of a politician to be a great TV commercial director. And I was not. And I was also young. And I had the luxury of going on another path. So analogous, 10 years later, isn't that neat? Like literally neat. 10 years later, I find myself at a crossroads again, not because I'm unhappy with what I'm doing. I think in terms of production work, I have it really good working with you. We have great projects that are with good clients that are relatively low stress. But I guess if back then it was a matter of I felt that my talents weren't being used right. And this is the first time I'm articulating this thought. I think now it's a matter of through doing specific kinds of work and a lot of feedback from other people, I'm discovering that I have a greater talent that lies elsewhere, not just in strictly being behind the camera. And if I had to sum it up, I just literally and figuratively, I just realized I have a voice to contribute. And it's also in the process of I've been working with different production people. I've had some gigs in front of the camera. So I've been exposed to a lot of other professionals basically doing what I'm doing behind the camera, whether directing or holding the camera. And then I realize now that I'm not a bad cameraman. I'm not a bad director, obviously. I'm doing this for a living. But at risk of sounding so old, like kids these days are so good with the camera. When I see guys getting shots now or like doing lighting, it's like, wow, I would have never thought of doing that. And I guess now I just feel like I want to do something where my gifts are really maximized, where I'm doing something that few people can do as well as I can with as little effort. You want to be somewhere where like your talents are maximized. And it's not just because I feel good doing something well. It's also because you can extract maximum value being unique kind of at what you're doing. And that's something I would advise for anyone if they had the luxury to do it, where the outsized rewards in life go to people who are a lot better. Like if you are maximizing what you're really good at, that's something that people need. And I realize now through specific things that happened that built up to this, I realize now that I guess I'm pretty good at lending my voice to specific things, not because anything like I'm not the most clever host or obviously not like the best looking guy on camera, but I guess I'm able to process things in a way that makes it really like digestible to people. Content has been my path into that kind of, especially in the motorcycling world, but also in doing online courses where I've realized that I have something to contribute beyond being behind the camera.
That's amazing, man. I love how you explained the giving value and extracting your talent and being honest enough with yourself to see that, okay, there are a lot of people who are talented now, especially with filmmaking. I have the confidence to speak and to host. There's not a lot of people have the courage to do that then. There's a stigma to it. Who am I to do this when
Yes, exactly.
these people are doing that? I feel very similarly with the podcast as well. Sort of an imposter syndrome, especially since I'm a big consumer of podcasts. You can't help but compare yourself to the people that you watch. And if you feel like you're never going to be at par with them, or are you ever going to be as big as them? Somebody asked me, why are you doing this? What's your reason? What's your why for doing the podcast? Honestly, for me, living abroad, I have less intimate conversations with people. At the core of it, it's really to have a conversation, to connect. And I like that it's a block time, an hour conversation, and we don't need to have small talk. We're approaching our 40s and see a lot of our peers who are just continuing their careers, kind of like maintaining the status quo, but you're taking a leap of faith. Maybe you can share what have been the challenges and also maybe the things that have felt like wins to you in terms of deciding this is what I'm going to do. You said that you're going to give up more editing jobs so that you can create more space for your project. What does that process look like?
That's a really good question because I think about that a lot. As a preamble to answering that question, this wasn't a decision like kind of shifting my career. It's not a decision I arrived at from a place of I'm sitting at home and I think, you know what, I want to do this instead. I can't quote the book exactly, but I think it's from Ego is the Enemy, Ryan Holiday. He distinguishes between two kinds of confidence. To paraphrase, kind of a delusional confidence that just comes from you have a really strong belief that you are meant to do or be something, and a confidence that comes gradually over time. In my case, the idea that I would be something more of like a personality than as a purely as a like a filmmaker, that's something that came over time, many different opportunities and wins this year. The most pivotal of which was when I joined this big motorcycle adventure event. It was FJ Moto Mountain Cross. Shout out Don Joseph if you're listening to this. He's the guy behind the whole event. And that's such an interesting event because it's a 3-day kind of amazing race, except it's not a race. So the competition is not who finishes first. The whole thing is more like just finish. It's an experience. It's designed to be an adventurous experience that you'll never forget through places where nobody goes on your motorcycle. But the contest is afterwards where people compete for the best photos, documentary about the event. This year was the third one. And I joined with no expectations. I joined wanting to just help out my team because it's a team event. And in terms of the documentary, like we'll see what happens. But in the end, our team ended up winning the docu. I was the one editing it and working together with my teammate, who's a really great videographer, Mither from New Jersey. Even though you can say this is such a niche event, like there's just like how many of us joined? 300, I think, 300 odd riders. The kind of recognition and respect gained from that has been slowly building up, and realized from that I guess I have a gift as kind of a combination storyteller, personality, and to dovetail with your question, the main challenge has been how do I maximize, optimize my resources, so that's time, money, equipment, etc., so that I can fully lean into what I'm good at to create maximum value. And that's a challenge because, for example, with editing, you could say that that's such a integral part of how I'm able to share my talent. But at the same time, it's such a major time sink, especially doing stuff that's related to travel or documentary, because there's so much footage, it takes so much time. So actually, that's my number one logistical or even business problem. How am I going to balance maximizing my time and maximizing my gift for storytelling, sharing things? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I am lucky though, because the idea that I do not make personal content to make money. I make money so that I can spend time to do my personal content. And I am lucky because since 2021, when kind of Skillshare discovered me, and then Skillshare is the biggest online learning platform, and they asked me to make a course. And the course that I made 3 years ago is still my best-selling course, and it supports me every month. It's variable, but it's a significant amount. So that actually like frees up my mind and my time to do these things. I learned from hanging out with other people. Thanks to the motorcycle industry, hang out with a lot of very successful entrepreneurs and executives. And I learned from them basically that they can't get bogged down in the details, and they're very strategic about how they basically multiply their impact with investments and getting the right people. And so that's my challenge right now. But at the same time, let's be honest, I personally, the things that I can personally do and don't need to delegate, I personally am working at like 50% capacity. It is a discipline issue. And that dovetails to something you might want to dive into if we have time. This is not the correct technical term, but it's an easy way to talk about it, like false dopamine and real dopamine. So I
Yeah.
really struggle with quote unquote false dopamine, delayed gratification. That's what you would call quote unquote real dopamine. And so I know in my heart that I am still capable of so much more without touching burnout. And it's a matter of trying to reclaim real dopamine. Know what I mean?
That's so true. I feel like we're living in a time where the potential is there for everyone, but does everyone have the discipline to get there?
Yeah.
Because at the same time, we're all distracted. We're consuming so much more than we used to. But the thing is, tell ourselves we need to consume so we can get inspired, right? But at the same time, you want to connect with people so you can build your community. But there's also the actual work, wherein putting in the time and the energy. Last week, life happened. For some reason, I couldn't upload an episode. Like I was on a streak na. I was episode 5 na. Like every Sunday I upload. But just a lot of stuff happened and I was like, man, can't believe I missed. But then it sort of like was a blessing in disguise because I just told myself, I'm not going to post it on a weekday. I'm just going to post it the next Sunday. Then I realized I created a buffer with that mistake. I'm a week ahead, so to speak. I tell myself that. But the thing is, I feel like if you're optimal, if you're disciplined, and if you look a few steps forward, gives you more space. It's easy to talk about stuff. It's easy to get excited. But when you're actually doing the work, when you're grinding it's you really feel the burn. But we know naman that when you finish it, it feels good, right? Like you feel fulfilled. And I guess like, you come from, we come from an industry wherein deadlines are constantly there and people comment. And I guess there's also that sort of becomes a voice to us as well. But then it becomes demonized at the same time because it's like, I don't want to put too much pressure on myself. I don't want to put a really hard deadline. But the thing is, in reality, it is important. I want to know, Lynn, how you navigate your workflow and finding that work-life balance. I mean, you love what you do. You love to ride, but you love to create, Ren. How do you find that balance between the two?
That's a good question because that's basically the main struggle right now. I just finished a really interesting book in audiobook form, The Molecule of More. So it's all about dopamine, which is why I'm going to say that word so many times. And it talks about how genetically there seem to be, broadly speaking, two different kinds of people. Dopaminergic people, or basically dopamine has to do with everything that is just out of your reach that you have to strive for. And people who are more here and now people. Because apparently, biologically, according to that book, the dopamine system chemically is completely, is like antagonistic to the molecules, the hormones, I guess, that enable us to enjoy being content here and now. Dopamine only promises. It doesn't allow us to enjoy things. It's like a completely different system. And so apparently, broadly speaking, genetically, there's two different kinds of people. People who are dopaminergic, so people who are very ambitious, people who really hustle, people who are really able to sacrifice immediate gratification to achieve goals. And we're very familiar with these kinds of people because these are the people that we see on social media. And there's people who are more like here and now, who are able to be content with what's in front of them. And so I feel a very, very strong sense that with what I want to achieve, that I want to be able to achieve things, to do really well. But I also am a strongly here and now person, which is a good thing on one hand, because I feel like I don't suffer from the hedonistic treadmill tendency where, say, achieve something, I do one thing really well, that I'm not thinking about the next thing already. I am, I guess, blessed to be able to really enjoy the moment. But there are seasons in life where you really want to push hard to do something. I guess in the recent past, it's only been because of external pressure that I've been able to flick that switch to really get into hustle mode, fully knowing that when the deadline comes, then I can take a break. I guess in a way, I am maybe like going against my chemistry when like my default wiring when I go into hustle mode. But at the same time, I guess what I'm really trying to do right now is try to be able to hack my system to just put in more of these sprints, because I'm tormented by an ever-growing backlog of like big personal edits, and there's like 2 in the pipeline right now that I so badly want to get done. And there's just things like I just have to be able to discipline myself, and I guess even the people around me, to say that, hey, when I say I'm going to edit, that means no meetings, no meetups, no coffee for 1 hour. Because if I just leave the house to do one errand, I know myself, like it's going to take me so long to ramp up to get focused again. I just had a thought related to that. Let me try to circle back to it. A byproduct of becoming more known in my sphere is that I get invited to a lot more things. And being invited to things and people wanting to hang out with you is cool, but it's a big distraction from the thing that made people want to hang out with you in the first place. And so that's something that I wouldn't say I'm struggling with right now, but it's something that I'm trying to balance. I don't want people to stop inviting me. I'm not a reclusive type. I'm not like, oh, I just want to create my art. I'm not that type of person. I like hanging out. I'm not an extrovert, but I love having great conversations like this. And so there has to come a point where you're able to say, like, I need to focus on the main thing. I need to shut away for a while so that I can do the things that people got to know me for. I suppose you've heard of this new book by Cal Newport. Is it Slow Productivity? Or was it like
I've heard of that. Yeah.
Lost Art of Achievement Without Burnout. And he basically argues for seasonality. He looks at the examples of many like great scientists and artists in the recent past where they've spent an extended period of time kind of with guilt-free wandering and guilt-free developing ideas over a long period of time, waiting until the moment was ripe to then hunker down and create the book, the movie, the musical. Thanks to his idea, making it a mainstream idea, I don't feel guilty anymore when I'm in incubation time. When I'm wandering, when I'm having quote unquote artist dates from the book The Artist Way, where I just sit somewhere outside and let the thoughts flow. And it's really different when you let the thoughts flow. So I am constantly trying to make more space to do that. Because of social media, most people nowadays just don't have any of that space in their lives to just sit, think, and let your mind wander. Because even when we're physically wandering, our minds are just we're just on our phones or posting on social media. We're so eager to show others before we take care of having some depth of experience for ourselves. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. Social media, gratification. But in a perfect world, my phone would be off every day from like 6 to 2. And then I would dive into the sea of social media again. But I'm also just so entertained by it all. So at the end of the day, the most viable solution to this, and it's credit to my friend who gave me kind of like the secondhand advice from his own therapist. It's all about developing a routine so that these things just become default, and you just, you take care of your business first and then you let other people in later. Like there's so much room anyway that I think our fear is getting disconnected, right? And it's also a form of being a people pleaser. Like, you don't want to keep people waiting too long. But I think, let's be real, you have to take care of the thing. And even if and when you take care of the thing, there'll still be so many hours left in the day to entertain other people.
I totally resonate with what you said about, like the incubation periods and being in creator mode. And you even mentioned the artist's way, which I'm doing the second time around. And it's still
nice.
as hard as probably even harder than the first time. The insights are still profound, but the discipline of morning pages, artist dates, it's very conflicting to, I guess, modern day living. Only a handful, I think, are living like off the grid, so to speak, like that don't use smartphones, that aren't using social media. Our careers are very, very linked to these platforms.
Exactly.
We need them. But at the same time, I guess I also asked myself this question. Let's say Instagram like had a glitch and it wasn't working. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, man, what if it really just stopped? And what would we do? It was a good point of reflection because I realized I would still shoot photos. I would still write. I would still make a film because I enjoy the process. I would still have a conversation because that's the thing, right? There's a mind fuck of like creating, enjoying the process. But then once it's out, you start looking at analytics. You start
Yeah,
looking at
true.
how engagement is doing. And then you start, criticizing and critiquing yourself since you are the host, you are the performer. Because you're
Mhm.
also trying to be better, but the ego is also there,
Mhm.
trying to feel good. I want to hear your thoughts on that because you're also the host, you're also the persona, but you're
Mhm.
also the one who creates the content. For some people, and we read this in the book, people that are trying to pursue their art, they end up not creating anything because they're so crippled or they're never happy with what they do. What's your process of killing your darlings, getting out of your own way to put it out there?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how this happened, but over time, I guess I'm lucky that I was able to overcome a lot of the self-critiquing neurosis that came with putting yourself out there. When I think about it, it's not because I think I'm better than anybody. I come into it this way. I come into everything very earnest, that I put in my best effort and that I created this not as a form of massaging my ego, but as a form of sharing some value with other people. And that helps not to take things so down personally. Classic perfectionist personality, I take way too long to bring something out. I mean, I feel good when it's done because it's about as good as I think it can be. But it also means I take way too long. In fact, some advice I received, I guess, during the pandemic when content was so big is that, well, you don't have to make it so damn perfect. Just like put it out there. It's tricky because I guess the more famous you are, which I'm obviously not, but the more famous you are, the less people need you to be good and the more they just need you to be genuine. But that's if you're a pure personality. But as creators, we still want to make things that we watch over and over because we're proud of it. I'm not going to watch 20 minutes of me talking about my day 10 years from now. At least I don't think I will. Just the earnestness of the attempt and like being honest that I'm not doing it so that people praise me or whatever. I think a big leap in kind of like my overcoming that neurosis probably honestly would have to do with having a good partner. My recent ex, who I'm still friends with, hi, if you're listening, I guess I just gained a lot of confidence from like having somebody root for me and giving me like honest but kind feedback. And that's not something I had when I started out. And it gave me a lot of confidence to just kind of do it. And then next thing also is on social media, there's always the next thing. It's just around the corner. It's not like you came out with a feature film and you have to wait years to do the next one so that like makabawi. But going back to your question of how you like kill your darlings, well, the next one's always around the corner. Good lesson is that you can never, ever, ever predict what is going to take hold. There's just some videos that suddenly like pop regardless of the effort you put into them, and there's some that you put so much effort into that don't really pop. So like kind of social media teaches you not to be too precious about one thing. But all of that said, I am very, very poor at like dealing with like haters or stupid comments. I think I'm still way more sensitive than your average social media personality. I'm still a person who like is very, very quick to commenters, even for saying something reasonable. It just ticks me off. So it's definitely a struggle. In fact, people tell me, no, just like if there's a negative comment, leave it there and let other people take care of it. But I still struggle with that, because I'm not into generating attention for attention's sake. Like I'm very earnest. I put in so much work. When I say something, it's probably because I thought about it for a long time. And so when some stupid random has their say that doesn't make any sense, I get very about it.
Yeah. I mean, we're human. I feel like if letting comments like that just slide off, in a way, you're losing a bit of your humanity. It's important not to care, but it's like leaving negativity in your space.
Yeah, exactly.
You
Yeah,
know
I
what I
think
mean? Like it's your choice. Like it's not, they don't need to be there. Like the
exactly.
haters and the trolls. We were raised with a Jesuit education, wherein the whole mantra is magis, to do more. But at the same time, we're living in a time wherein hustle culture is being highlighted as something that isn't healthy, finding that work-life balance, taking care of yourself. Has there been a rewiring when it comes to the way you were educated and as compared to the way you're figuring out how to live a good life, live a balanced life? Because like I think about this a lot. Mortality, especially with the way things are, the world is now, it's pretty scary with climate change and all the wars. We're not in Gaza, but like what if we actually experience something like that, wherein all these things we're doing with creativity and social media, it won't be the priority. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of rewiring, there's something that happened in the sense that all the influential books that I read in the 2010s was all written by white male tech bros that were gospel truth for millennials, like do what you love and then give it your all. Gen Z is like poked holes into so much of that overall, like the ideas of that specific zeitgeist. And it's actually freed me from a bit of angst because, like I said, I think like my personality, I'm naturally more inclined to just be content in the here and now. And it clashes with kind of like my whole Athenian, like magis, that side of my personality where if I'm going to do something, I have to do it up to a certain standard. I have to do it better than what we've seen. And so that's why I guess I've been so focused on trying to spend my time doing something that is hard for other people to do, because then you are less concerned about being better than anybody and just being kind of the best version of yourself as an artist in your sphere, you know, like blue ocean, red ocean. So I've been very focused on finding my own blue ocean so that it's not so that I can put in less effort, but it's so that I'm not swimming, looking at the other lane, trying to make sure no one is going faster than me. Because also, I don't know what it is in my personality. Like, I feel very stressed by competition, even though it does and has brought out the best in me. I'm the guy, like, if we can all win, that would be great. But I think the reality as well, especially in a small market like the Philippines, is that can be a zero-sum game where if one person wins, the other person doesn't, and then that guy gets all the rewards. So it is something I struggle with a little bit. But again, I'm just trying to find a way that I can pursue excellence more from, I guess, a better place on the inside instead of pursuing excellence out of fear that I'm going to lose out.
What do you think cultivated this being present in the moment as compared to like being very competitive? Because I feel like I resonate with that a lot. I'm definitely not a competitor. I don't like the games. I don't like competing, but I was raised to be a competitor. I think until now, a lot of the conversations with family are like, how's your business? How's your career? How are you doing? Are you investing? It's not something that I enjoy talking about. Much rather talk about things like this. How was that cultivated, maybe in childhood or growing up, to be the person that you are now?
I think it's definitely my parents are very chill. In school, I was always an achiever, but that was all very internally motivated. But I did realize when I had a phase in my late 20s, early 30s, where I kind of had to struggle with realizing that I had an internal dialogue of I need to be excellent to feel worthy. And so I did have a phase of having to come to terms with like, you'll be okay even if you're without the external achievement or people thinking you're so smart and all of that. I did do pretty formal work on it, workshops, forms of group therapy, to be able to come to terms with always feeling that it has to be great to be good enough. And this is the source of why people love you. You know what I mean? Not that my parents ever made me feel that way. I just don't know where I picked it up. My theory is that when people started praising me at a young age for doing well in school, I guess I just internalized this is how I get people to love me, you know, like by being like smart, by being responsible, by being good at stuff. And maybe that's where my people pleasing came from as well. That's something I struggle with, people pleasing. So when you're a quote unquote achiever, that means that you base your self-esteem on mainly on other people's feedback on what you do. You're always trying to live up to their standards to impress them. And so that's something that I had to and still have to process. Let me put it this way. My brother, I have one brother. he says that in retrospect, he actually wishes my parents would have pushed him harder in school because I guess he feels like it would have opened more doors for him. But I can't complain because I have very little angst or emotional trauma, if at all, from my family or from my childhood. Parents have always provided for everything. So because I think a lot of people who develop a very hustle mentality are people who like grew up with very little and so had to fight for whatever they got. I see that as kind of a very common thread with the people who are most motivated to just keep pushing for more, 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 more. And great things can be done if you have that kind of motivation. But it also, again, I see a common thread where people who come out of that and achieve a lot of things are also very unable to enjoy what they achieve. And for me, like you said, life is short. Life is very uncertain. So if we strive and we can't enjoy the fruits of our labor, if we can't appreciate what we have now, then what's the point? And I'm just always trying to find that balance where I can find the fire to do things well, to do big things, still be able to always bask in the moment, enjoy my time with friends, and, just live a good life.
It's the truth. It's all in the gray, right? It's not black and white. We are living our lives. It is fragile, but we know what makes us happy. We know what inspires us, what makes us feel fulfilled. And if you remember in The Artist's Way, she was writing about what kind of God we had. Probably one of the most striking parts of that book, because it really made me question. You can actually have a God, a universe that is very gentle, that's very caring, nourishing, not someone who's counting your wins, counting your losses. Curious about your thoughts on the way you see God, creator, the way life serves or takes care of you.
Great question. Let me think. I guess I still believe kind of like in a kind of fundamental goodness and gentleness of the universe. I'm also well aware that many people don't come from a place of privilege where they can just like say, if I just do my thing, then everything is gonna work out one day. I'm aware that for that to be broadly true, we have at a certain like space of relative stability in our lives. But if my life has been any example, I've just found that the truer I've been to myself and my gifts and my paths, the better things have turned out for me. And there are many times when it is just up to me to kind of step up to that opportunity and make the best of it. And dovetailing that to that idea, to the question you asked earlier of kind of what is the purpose of art in a world where all of this is happening. I guess it's a cliche by now, but the things artists create is what makes life worth living. And even when you talk economically, art doesn't make money until it does. When you create a story that's so compelling that people get to see, it creates entire economies. When you look at like the Hollywood level, or like TV, when things get popular, people imagine, people made up, but then they create entire economies with books, merchandise, toys, discussion on social media. This is kind of the power of creative work on the biggest stage. And I think that if you're an artist and if you have some ambition, then that's there. It's not easy, especially if you don't live in one of like the capitals of creativity and this kind of work. There's a lot of politics involved, but there are many other, especially nowadays, there are many other smaller ways to achieve some measure of that. And life would be very cold without what we do.
I totally agree. It's what makes life fun, exciting, fulfilling. And to wrap this up, man, what are the things like maybe short-term, long-term that make you feel excited about life?
I'm glad you asked that question because I have a very specific answer to that. I just finished reading 2 books by the same author. His name's Ted Simon. He's 95 years old now. But in the 70s, he did the original Around the World motorcycle trip. And then he did it again when he was 70. So he did it when he was like 43. And he did the same thing again when he was 70. And then he wrote 1 book each about each of those trips. And what really, really struck me was the books were written so beautifully. There was a depth of insight, beautiful prose, so much funny, insightful observation about people and the world and how the world changed between those 2 trips, the 20, 30 years between those 2 trips. And it inspired me, like not right around the world, but to pursue projects that require that depth of time, thought, and work. The idea of a long-term big creative projects is what really excites me now, because let's face it, if you're only, quote unquote, only, I keep on doing this, but if you're only doing social media in as little as 1 to 3 years, it's going to be forgotten. But work that requires you to sit with it over periods of months and years, that work has a better chance of lasting because of kind of the depth and quality that you can achieve. So whether it's like a book, a feature documentary, a feature film, it's mainly those three things, I guess. The idea of being able to complete projects like that in the future, and in the process being able to distinguish myself from many other people, move my career forward as a result. I don't think you can replace the experience of depth that you can get doing a project like that with like just doing several short projects. It's different, and I personally want to see what's in here, what this is capable of, if I give it a chance to really stay with something over a long period of time. That's what excites me.
I love that, man. I think that we're on the same page with like big projects that you want to do, and they're mountains, but at the same time, the writers, the filmmakers we love, those are long-term projects, right?
Yeah.
It requires a certain discipline, certain dedication. But I mean, the gratification from that process is probably going to be amazing, immeasurable, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, man. I appreciate all the insights. Love the conversation.
Thanks for letting me ramble. It's very therapeutic, and yeah, it's just great sharing this space with you, talking about all these things. That 1 hour flew by. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
It did. No, thank you, man. Really appreciate it, and best of luck with this new phase. It's an exciting time.
The Nick Daez Podcast.